Hello again! I'm going to be talking this time about the interview assignment. This one won't be as long as the last video, so don't worry. Yes, you can read all about them under the Assignments tab or under the Files tab, but I think it's a little bit more helpful to have both the written and the spoken explanation about it. So you'll see me duplicate those with every assignment that we do have. Again, I'm going to be split screening it. You'll be used to that. I won't keep saying that every time I record a video, but for these first few, I'll just kind of remind you, just in case you're like, where is she looking? All right, so this is the interview assignment. This one is due Sunday, September 23rd. All of our assignments are due on Canvas. And again, this is due by 11:59, or I like to say midnight, but sometimes when I used to say midnight, people used to be confused. I'm like, oh, is that Saturday going into Sunday or Sunday going into Monday? So I like to say 11:59 just to kind of reduce that assignment. All right, so the length of this assignment is 1,200 to 1,400 words. You are doing 3 interviews, so that's about 300 to 400 words per interview. This is 9% of your final grade. The number of sources you'll need are 3 interviews. You don't need any additional outside research outside of your interviews. MLA citation, document design, 12-point Times New Roman or Calibri font, nothing crazy, basically, and then 1-inch margins. And then acceptable file types are just Word docs, RTFs, and PDFs. So assignment details. You will interview 3 different people inquiring about their perspectives about what excites, scares, and confuses them most about the techno future. These 3 people should clearly be from different generations. In other words, you cannot interview 3 of your closest friends whose ages are near your own. I do want to be really clear about that you should really aim for 3 different, very different generations. You might interview a child. That's always an interesting interview. I'm sure you'll get some crazy responses there. You could interview a grandparent. That could give you some different perspectives. And you might interview, let's say, a boss, or you might, you could interview a friend as well, somebody from a different generation from those 3 that you have selected. You cannot interview me for this assignment. Every time I do an interview assignment, I usually get a student asking if they can interview me, so no. You should ask permission to interview these people. Don't assume that they will help you out. Even though it might be your grandparent, they might not feel very comfortable being interviewed necessarily. So you do want to just, out of courtesy, make sure you do ask them. And then also think of a backup. Saying that your interviewees didn't respond is not an excuse not to complete the assignment. Be sure you're prepared for that possibility. Anytime you have a human factor in anything and everything can go wrong. So make sure you do have a backup, at least one. You don't have to email them right away. If all 3 respond pretty quickly, great. But you do want to just have something in the back of your mind just in case something doesn't work out. This interview can be done whenever and wherever is most convenient for you and your interviewee, in person, at home, at a public location, via Skype, or any other means. You could email the person the questions and get responses that way. However you want to do this interview is completely up to you. What I would encourage you to do is draft a list of questions in advance and share them with your interviewee in advance if possible. It's always difficult when you're talking to somebody or interviewing somebody if they don't have the questions in front of them. Think about when you're on a job interview, how awkward it is, right? If someone just throws questions at you and you have to kind of pause and think, and every second of silence is a little bit stressful, right? So I would ask your interviewee, or give your interviewee the questions you're going to ask ahead of time. That way they have a little bit of time to think about them. They can kind of stew on them for a little while and come with some really thoughtful answers that will be really good for your paper. The questions you decide to ask are your choice, depending on your interests and the people you choose to interview. You should, however, take the time to explain what we're discussing in class. It might be helpful to briefly explain your own personal definition of techno-future. You might accomplish this by giving examples from class or examples from movies or TV shows you've seen. When drafting your list of questions, you might consider the following ideas. You're not limited to these, but you must ask the same questions to each of your 3 interviewees. So what I would recommend before you start this assignment is come up with a list of questions that you're going to ask each interviewee. I think 5 questions is a good place to start. Anything less than that, you might not get enough information for this paper, so I think having at least 5 questions you're going to ask everybody is a good place. You don't have to stick with the questions that I've listed here. These are just some ideas. You are more than welcome to use them, but you're not limited to them. But let's go through these different types of questions. And I kind of broke them down in a couple different categories. So this first category are questions about the person's experiences and opinions. So here are the couple questions. What was technology like for you growing up? And I'm sure if you asked a grandparent, it would be very different, right? If you asked somebody of your own generation. Are there certain technologies that are now obsolete? When you were younger, where did you imagine technology being at this point in your life? Do you consider yourself an early adopter, someone who wants to participate in or buy the newest technology as soon as it comes out? Or do you consider yourself a wait-and-seer, really somebody who waits to see if people really enjoy it or if it's worth it, and then they go perhaps purchase it or kind of mess around with it? Next category, questions about what excites your interviewee about the techno future. In your lifetime, what do you imagine will be the most important technological advancement you'll see? If blank was developed, I would feel like I was living in the future. In your lifetime, what has been the most exciting technological development you've witnessed? And then finally, two more categories. Questions about what scares your interviewee about the techno future. What makes you nervous about technology? What changes have you witnessed, for better or worse, with technology? Then describe a situation in which you felt uncomfortable using technology. And I think that last one is something that we all have experience with, no matter how fluent we feel in technology, right? If we get a new phone, even if it's a new iPhone update, right? We kind of have to think, oh, is there something different about this? Is the keyboard layout a little weirder? So there are certain things that are very uncomfortable sometimes. Then questions about what confuses your interviewee about the techno future. When I hear people discussing blank, I immediately get confused. Describe a situation in which you encountered using a new technology for the first time. What was it like? And then it seems to me that everyone enjoys blank, but I don't see the purpose of it. So once you're finished with your interview, make sure you record your own reactions immediately. You'll need these in your paper too. So you want to make sure you're putting your own responses. So you might say, wow, I never thought anybody would be, scared of using whatever technology. That never even dawned on me. But so-and-so I interviewed was, talked a lot about that. So you might want to just kind of jot down some notes of your own responses, whether or not you spoke to that person on the phone, whether or not it was an email, whatever. But just make sure you record your own initial thoughts, because that'll help you later when you sit down to actually write this. Once you complete the interviews, type up the summary of the experience, including with whom you spoke and why, and the comments you found most interesting. Be sure to share a brief self-reflection on what you learned as a result of this experience. Your summary must be written in paragraph form. If you list a question and its response, you will not have success on this assignment. On a separate page after your essay, please list all the questions you asked, along with the names of the individuals you interviewed. There we go. So after you've written your essay, on the next page, just like you would for a works cited, basically, I want you to list the questions that you asked, and then the names of the individuals that you interviewed. All right, and then to wrap up this assignment, I do have a little bit of a framework for an interview essay. There are two different ways I've labeled here that you could set up your actual essay. Framework A goes with the introduction, kind of the overview of the questions you asked your interviewees, and then an overview of who your interviewees are. Maybe their names, their ages, why you've selected them. In this one, you could break it down by interviewee. So you would talk about interviewee A, this is tough to say, interviewee A first, all of their responses, interviewee B, all of their responses, interviewee C, all of their responses, and then conclude with just your own reflection about what you learned from these interviews. Framework B, you could do the same intro, overview of the questions, and overview of your interviewees. And then instead of breaking it down by interviewee, you break it down by question. So question, A, then the review of the questions you asked and all of your interviewees' responses. Question B, a review of all the questions you asked and all the interviewees' responses. And however many questions you asked, you could break it down like that. And then to conclude, you would have your own reflection about what you learned from these interviews. Same with that first framework. And then the grading. I'll be using the English 212 rubric to grade this essay. I'll be looking for consistent use of the same questions across all three interviews, and I'll be looking for thoughtful reflections of your own following the interviews. So that's our interview assignment. Again, that's due September 23rd, so you have a couple weeks to go still, so that gives you some time to find some interviewees and ask them some questions. But in the meantime, if you have any questions about the interview assignment, shoot me an email. I'll be happy to help.